All right, welcome back here to the FHS Football Show here on FloatHSFootball.com. Appreciate everybody watching us here on our YouTube channel as well at FloatHS Football, or listening to the audio version of this show on your favorite podcast platform, including on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and iHeartRadio. Definitely appreciate everybody joining us here. Obviously, we've got some big news to talk about here on the show today, and that's dealing with, well, if you thought with the reclassification stuff was kind of over with here for football and all that, well, I got big news for you. It really is kind of like, yeah, it really is a really interesting in terms of what is happening here. A lot going on here. And, well, we're going to get into it here in just a moment, why it's not over yet. It's definitely not over yet in terms of everything dealing with the football reclassification for 2026 and 2027. Yeah, there's a lot to get to here. Anyways, we want to thank our partners that our proud, loyal partners that help make everything happen on FloatHSFootball.com, and including on our YouTube channel and our audio platforms on the podcast distribution channels we have. And our proud, loyal partners include Jaguars PREP, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Foundation, ScoreStream, Teknovate Consulting Partners, BoxOut Sports, NFHS Network, and FirstDown PlayBook. And with that said, we got some stuff to talk about here, because the FHSAA Board of Directors has called a meeting for next Thursday, January 29th at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and a lot going on there with that. So the FHSAA Board of Directors is going to meet again next Thursday, January 29th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to do a live stream. We're going to start that around 10:45 a.m. that day. We're going to live stream. We'll bring in the live stream from the Board of Directors meeting. We'll have discussion beforehand. We'll set the table beforehand, and we'll have discussion afterwards, and maybe during the Board of Directors meeting as well, to discuss two of the three topics that's on the agenda. The third topic is a ECG form. It's something dealing with sports medicine. We're not going to dive into that particular part, but the two parts, the first two agenda items, are going to be the biggest particular topics that we're going to talk about here today, here on the FloatHS Football Show here. And we'll talk about it, go over it, and discuss what is about to happen here. And again, if you thought the football reclassification stuff was done and over with, I suggest you might want to go ahead and hit those brakes, because it really, at this particular point, we've got a lot here. There's a lot to discuss here. And obviously, we're going to start with the elephant in the room, and that's with the rural classification. Obviously, that is going to be the biggest topic here. And you can kind of see that there was going to be some issues. The issues were cooking, but do we think we would get to this particular point where we're at? I kind of had a feeling the way things were going on the onset. Once the FHSAA Board of Directors in early November voted for the 6 classifications plus rural model to use for the next 2 years, it kind of went, we kind of knew something was up, but we think that we get to this point where maybe the rural classification was going to be done? Well, not necessarily at the start, but as we started seeing the dominoes start to fall, yes, we started talking about it on social media, like, hey, the rural classification it's got problems. Kind of the domino linchpin kind of started with Dixie County when the morning of the FHSAA Board of Directors meeting vote back on November 3rd, they voted and for the 6+ rural, and Dixie County had already announced they were headed for the Sunshine State Athletic Association's Atlantic League. And sure enough, as that vote came out, some other schools started following. And well, then, right before the state championships, in December, we got the tentative classifications. Right afterwards, we got the finalized classifications before everybody went home for Christmas break and for New Year's. Needless to say, we are at a conjecture point now why this meeting has been called by the FHSAA Board of Directors. It's rural classification now. There's obviously a lot of us have seen it. We've talked about it on social media. We've talked about it particularly on X/Twitter. And that basically starts with the fact that we have the football classifications dealing with Class Rural and Class 1A. That is going to be talked about here. That's the first agenda item brought to you by FHSAA Executive Director Craig Damon. Here's what's basically going to happen. This is what the detail. So there's three parts to this: detailed information, what you're going to have, the detailed information in the agenda, and then you're going to have the executive director recommendation, and then you're going to have the rationale impact. So we're going to bring up each other on the screen. We'll read it here as well. We'll discuss it and talk about it. And with that said, here's the detailed information. To the best of their knowledge, there's 16 teams of the 38 teams that are qualified for the World Class committed to participate in the state series. FHSAA policy 12.3.2.1 requires there must be a minimum of 24 schools committed in order to have the World Class. Well, Corey Davis of the Palaca Daily News mentioned that there's 18 schools. Obviously, the list hasn't been updated since December 18th, which was right prior to Christmas break when changes were being made still, some teams dropping and so forth. So with that said, Class 1A has 34 schools committed to participate in the FHSAA State Series. The enrollment maximum for rural and 1A are not far off. Obviously, rural 111 to 617, 1A 98 to 502. So we've got that basically cooking here, the detailed information. We know at some point we have a feeling that Class Rural may be down, would have been down to some point maybe about 10 to 14 teams left, and we knew that that was not feasible. We knew that that was not going to be sustainable in terms of holding the classification, even when it dropped down below 20, below 26, 24. We knew that the numbers weren't there for sustainability. But at some point, was there a thought maybe from the FHSAA that they could keep the World Class even with the small amount of teams? Possibly, yes, because obviously in the FHSAA policies and bylaws, and more so the policies, is that there is a rural classification. But the problem is, most of these teams that were designated for rural have since joined the Sunshine State Athletic Association's Atlantic League. They have left. They're in terms of for their football, not for all sports, but just for football. We're focused on particular on football here. At this particular point here, we have to really kind of think about this here. This is a big issue. It's an issue that I'm surprised it's taken us this long, considering that we're now, when I'm recording this is the 23rd of January. Okay. And the agenda came out yesterday, 22nd of January, and the meetings for the 29th of January. Okay. I'm kind of surprised that it took this long here in the month of January to get to this point, to have this discussion. But I think at this point, when more schools have left that were committed to the state series, and not just rural schools, there's been other schools as well. I mean, we can point to schools like Avon Park, Lake Placid, Lemon Bay. We can point to some bigger, a little bit bigger programs, not necessarily rural, but a little bit bigger than the rural programs, 2A, 3A programs. When you have all this shuffling happening, you got to address it at some point, and you have to address it. And this is I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything like this happen in over 16 years of covering high school football in this state. I've never seen anything like this, to the point of we've got issues beyond issues on this. Like, we're having to come back and readdress stuff before anybody can really set a schedule. I mean, we already got some teams that have set schedules, but really at this particular point, where are we at? Where are we at with this in terms of basically, why are we, this is where we're at. We're having to come back and do this. We're having to come back and consolidate a classification, which is what we're about here. So that's what we're going to talk about. What's the recommendation? So the recommendation from the executive director says move the rural schools committed to participate in the FHSAA State Series into Class 1A. This would require a realignment of Class 1A, the creation of a couple new districts, and the addition of area teams to existing districts. Well, with that said, we've got some rural schools out in the Panhandle that are, that are not going to be probably not going to be part of the SSAA Atlantic League. It depends. It depends on what's going to happen. Obviously, Blountstown's going to be one. You got Madison County being another. Potentially Baker is one. And then looking at a couple others, Baker, and then Northview might be. Northview's had apparently as inquired positive from my understanding, but nothing's been moved on that yet. Baker, I think, may have inquired too, but again, nothing on that front. So, at this particular point, yeah, you got to deal with Blountstown, you got to deal with Madison County. So say Baker and Northview head to the Atlantic League, which is still a possibility at this particular point. Okay, well, you could move Blountstown and Madison County into the district with North Florida Christian FAMU and Maclay in 1A. But you've got some Gainesville area schools, North Central Florida. Obviously, Chiefland, Williston, Hawthorne, Fort White, Lafayette. You got to create a district for these guys. So that's what they're probably talking about, is creating a district like that to move some of these teams in. Obviously, you got schools downstate. You got Pahokee, you got Moorhaven, you got Fort Meade sitting there. You got to deal with those programs. Got to move them somewhere. So there's a reshuffling here. This is part of the reason why we haven't really focused on any of the districts yet, and really trying to not even focus on the schedules because that have come out. There's been a few, but because there could be some changes here, other changes here besides what we're talking about. Obviously, the executive director recommendation is this to move the rural school. Obviously, then there's the rationale part, and the rationale impact. Combining the two classes would increase the number of schools participating in the FHSAA series in Class 1A to approximately 50 schools. This change aligns the association in compliance with FHSAA policy 12.3.2.1. Okay. So, I have some questions about this. Like, could we have seen this coming? Part of it, yes, because here's the thing. Obviously, schools weren't necessarily thrilled about the true seeding 1 through 16 in the playoff bracket. They prefer their region 1, 2, 3, 4, even if they had to go schedule their own 10 games. I think maybe schools were hoping that would go back to that, and it didn't in the rural. So it didn't happen. So that's a big thing. But this is the issue that we're facing now, is that we've got to consolidate classes. Rural classification is going to be gone. Obviously, there's some other questions we're going to throw out here, or the things that we're going to throw on thought of the ripple effects, so to speak, of combining rural with 1A. Obviously, there's a couple schools in 1A and in the rural that I think would probably be better off being moved to 2A based upon their numbers, and not maybe. And we're talking on the high end would be like a Northview if they're still in the rural, and obviously Williston, Madison County 1A, Chiefland 1A. I mean, most of them are going to be 1A. Another school that I'm really intrigued to see what's going to happen with them, because they're designated rural right now, is Marathon. I'm interested to see if they put a feeler out there to join the SSAA Atlantic League. That one, because of the far reaches of the Keys. I don't know if they're going to be comfortable playing in a 1A district. Another reason probably for Marathon that would and I'm not advocating for Marathon to do it. I'm just curious if Marathon's going to do it, is that the fact that their rival Coral Shores has already joined the SSAA Atlantic League. That one came out of the blue over the last week. I think there's a potential chance that Marathon goes that direction, but then there's a potential chance that Marathon says, "Hey, we'll take the 1A district. This may not be too bad for us. We'll figure it out. We can go from there." But there's a lot in play here. There's a lot in play here. There's also we look at another program like Hilliard. Hilliard hasn't done anything. They're still designated rural. They haven't applied for the SSAA Atlantic League from far as we know. Do they go into that district that basically will be a Jacksonville district that, includes like programs like Trinity Christian and University, the University Christian? Are you going to go that route? Are you willing to be in that direction? I don't know if Hilliard's going to go for that or not. Again, this is probably going to be a lot of news to a lot of y'all that are listening here. By the way, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button at Florida HS Football. Hit that notification bell. as we talk about everything here on the Florida HS Football Show, not just this particular show, but all shows. You'll get notifications if you hit that notification bell when we go live or when we post new content. So hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. And we appreciate everybody watching us here on the Florida HS Football Show here on YouTube or listening to it on your favorite podcast platform, including Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. All right. So we know the rational impact. This is pretty much, I feel like it's going to be a done deal. They're going to combine. There's just no way they can't do this. But the question is what kind of discussion is going to come out of the board of directors? This meeting's going to be held virtually. So I'm curious to see what comes out of this from the board of directors. I'm also curious to see, is there going to be any public comment input? I haven't seen anything about, being able for anybody to put public comment in for this, and considering that these are going to be action items. I feel like there has to be somewhere for public comment. I haven't seen a link for that. So again, I don't know what's going to happen here, but there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to chew on with this one because, again, it's not just the issues in rural 1A that I feel like are a problem. You've got some issues in 2A. Obviously, you got 11 districts there. 1A has 11 districts. But 3A's got some issues, too, that, there's some 2-team districts lurking around now. Again, the issues that you wanted to avoid, which is what the big issues they talked about avoiding, those issues have creeped back into the conversation here, and that's a problem in itself when we're talking about all of this and talking about everything that is happening in terms of the reclassification stuff that just basically happened last month, and now here we are. We're kind of back at square one, dealing with a couple of classifications, so to speak. All right. So now we've got the other issue because of this with the rural classification, the issues there. It's also created another issue that's been kind of going on a little bit longer, but this next agenda item is kind of twofold, and there's two parts to it, and I wish it was kind of separated into like two items itself, and I have a feeling maybe the board of directors separates it into two items because one part of this I agree on, the other part I don't agree on. And we'll talk about that. And that's independence. That's dealing with the independent school participation outside the regular season. And don't let the title fool you. There's actually, in terms of what's going to be there on that, we're going to talk about that here in just a moment here in terms of what the agenda item really entails here. And that item really entails basically this, and we'll talk about the detailed information, and then we'll talk about the recommendation, because the recommendation is where it's split in twofold, and that's where I have the issue with that. Again, it's my opinion. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm not here to come after any particular anybody. It's just that these issues have been brewing for a while, and I feel like some of the stuff that's happening now is more of a reactive reaction instead of being a proactive reaction, if that makes sense. I feel like a lot of this has been more right. What we're seeing right now is reactive versus being proactive to nipping issues in the bud instead of having to come back and address the issues, because we could see things kind of happening on the outside. But again, we're media. We're on the outside. We got our ears to the ground, feet on the ground, so to speak. Okay, the FHSAA, they have to serve 700 plus member schools. Okay, they got a lot there. So again, they may not be, and they got multiple sports to deal with. So in the end of the day, this is basically what we're at. Independent school participation outside the regular season. So the detailed information, the association permits member schools to exercise an option of independence rather than competing for a state championship series. Historically, this option was designed to accommodate specific circumstances over time. The option of independence has evolved into a general choice available to any member school. Independent schools may elect to participate in conferences or leagues outside the association. However, they remain subject to the association's established regular season dates and applicable bylaws. And recently, concerns have risen as a former league has reorganized into a separate governing association with its own membership requirements, bylaws, and governance structure. Schools choosing to remain independent within our association while simultaneously competing for championships under another association may be required to comply with conflicting rules, policies, eligibility standards. This creates potential for confusion, inconsistent application of bylaws, and challenges in enforcement for both organizations. So we've got that. There's the detailed information there that we've got there. The biggest thing now is what's the recommendation from FHA Executive Director Craig Devon. This is also his the second agenda item that he submitted for this board meeting, which you could call it a emergency board meeting, you could call it a special board meeting, but this is outside of the regular scheduled board meeting, which the next FHA board of directors meeting is not scheduled until February 22nd, 23rd. So I'm kind of glad again we're addressing it maybe partially now. Did it have to take this long? I'm not so sure it needed to take this long to get to the fact that we needed to discuss this issue of the rural 1A, and obviously this issue about the school participation stuff. But the recommendation that is on here from FHA Executive Director Craig Damon, this is where I say split the two parts. First part is, it is recommended that the association requires schools to amend their membership status to member by sport for any sport in which they choose to compete under the governance of an athletic association or organization. All right, understand that. They want to provide more clarity. Okay, are you FHA for football? Be it you're in the state series or you're independent, or if you're not, you're playing in the SSAA, be their Atlantic League, 11-man league, 8-man league, whatever it may be. You need to be you need to take your school sport by sport. You're not playing under FHA for football. You're out for football, and you're over with the SSAA. All right, they're trying to get clarity. I understand that, totally understand that. I think a lot of people would understand that. The second part of this is where I feel like this is more of a reactive move by any means because of the numbers that have deflected over to the SSAA. Additionally, the FHA will establish an independent league. Any school exercising the option for independence may maintain full membership if they choose to compete in the FHA Independent League. Again, this is where I feel like this is being very reactive again because the FHA has lost so many schools to the SSAA here in the last basically 2 months. For football, the number of football schools have been reduced down basically by quite a few. I mean, when you get a deflection of 30, 40 schools leaving to go to the SSAA, and there's still going to be a few more that have not been announced that are going to go. From my understanding, from my knowledge, from my sources, that and I got a variety of sources, a variety of schools, and I've heard of all sorts of different things. There's going to be more announced, I think. So this is where again, this whole thing about this independent league, you've got the state series, all right, for the FHA, all right. You want to play for a championship? Want to play for a trophy? Commit to the state series. Or you're playing for the championship, or you're playing there's only one state title for each of the SSA 8-man league, the SSA 11-man league, the SSA Atlantic League. There's one state championship trophy for each of those. And then they have what the FIT is kind of modeled on. They have the basically what you call consolation brackets, whatever you want to call it, that are the 5A, 4A, what they call, or what they call like 2A, 3A, whatever they put in the name behind it. Those are not state championship brackets, but they're brackets that you play. You have to play a few games before you even get to hold a trophy up, so to speak. You basically, you have that option. Okay, so if at this point, creating an independent, something that's in the middle between FHA State Series and what the SSA offers, I feel like this is kind of reactive to the whole situation. At this particular point, I think the proactive approach would have been the whole proactive approach would have been, all right, if there was rumblings about the rural schools having issues with what's happened the last couple of years, especially with the 1 through 16 playoff bracket, not having regions. My thought would have been things needed to be looked at a little bit more. I think this is again, all of this, in my opinion. Here's another thing, and this is bring in my opinion here, but let me before I bring my opinion in on this particular more of my opinion on this part. Let's go to let's bring up the rationale and impact. Requiring schools to hold member by sport status when competing under another association provides clarity, consistency, and fairness in governance. It eliminates the expectation that a school can simultaneously comply with two potential conflicting sets of bylaws, eligibility standards, and administrative requirements. Again, totally understand that. Totally get it. Establishing an independent league under the FHSAA would provide opportunities for play beyond the regular season for qualifying teams without requiring an amendment to their membership status. Again, this is where I feel like this is a reactive move, not a proactive move, because of what has happened here, because of all the teams that have left to go to the SSAA. And in my opinion, when we look at this, we'll as I talk about this, the SSAA in the Sunshine State Athletic Association, at this point, they are their own, or they're their own association. They have to be, you have to be recognized. You have to recognize them as that they've gained strength. They've gained strength here the last 2 months, and they've grown the last 2 months. My thing is that when you're dealing with this, on the other side with the FHA for the state series, is that, okay, if the number of teams leaving rural out of football, you've got to look at what are the issues behind why they left. What are the reasons why they said, hey, we don't want to do this anymore? And is it because of the dominance that's happened over the last, 5, 6, 7 years, where it's been Madison County, Hawthorne winning the state titles? Could that be part of the reason? Could it be part of the reason is because of the 1 through 16 with the bracket? And again, this is not, by the way, calling out the schools. I'm, like dominance, Madison County, Hawthorne. It's no ill will, not trying to downplay anything with those programs. They've had some solid teams. My thing is that part of the reason why they're leaving and why these schools have left out of the rural league. This is, why Class Rural is heading down this path. This path to being basically folded into Class 1A, Class Rural does not exist for the next 2 years, at least in football. If ever again. There's a good possibility Class Rural will never exist again in football. It may exist in the other team sports that offer it, but this will also lead to the demise of Class Rural for those other sports because of what's happening here in football. That could lead to it. I'm not saying it will. It could. Could is the big keyword there. The biggest thing at this particular point, there's a lot here. I just feel like creating an independent league in between what the FHA offers in the state series and what the SSA offers for teams in their association, I don't know. It's reactive. Again, you got to get to the point of why these teams left. And what would it take to get some of those programs back? There's also, talk about, competitive equality, competitive balance, I should say. That, there has to be something done. Also, another thing was that these classifications, I think some of this could have been avoided if the FHA would just establish look to our neighbors to the north at what the Georgia High School Association Judge, GHSA for short. They have a classification committee that handles all of this stuff, including proposing what the system needs to be, dealing with the appeals go up and down. It's a separate independent committee of the association that sends this stuff back up to, obviously to the staff. I feel like that is something that needs to be done here. And I've suggested that, obviously Craig Damon did do a classification committee a couple years ago, did it. But I feel like it needs to be something that's established like in an advisory committee, like the athletic director's advisory committee, like the football advisory committee. It needs to be a committee like that that is going to send these recommendations that are going to be put on the table and say, hey, okay, we see this issue, we need to address this, or hey, we can make this better, and here's a series of improvements, but we're going to apply it over a course of, say, 2 years or 4 years, whatever it may be, something like that. That's where I feel like, if that was done, I feel like some of the issues could have been avoided here. Again, I just, I was also, thought maybe the 5 class plus rural would have been a better idea. But again, would that have stopped the bleeding that the rural classification has had? Probably not. If nothing was changed in terms of, okay, we're not going to go back to regions. We're not going to go back to maybe district play, which some coaches were under the assumption that they were going to have district play. I know a few coaches in the world that thought, hey, we're going to have district play. We should have mandated district play. And then all of a sudden they told no, and no, it's everything's remaining the same. And I think that frustrated a lot of coaches too, because I think maybe for a lot of schools, hey, at least mandated district play, at least you're guaranteed games. Maybe for some teams it was like, hey, I don't have to sit there and try to scrounge up 10 games. Maybe that was part of it. I don't know, but I mean, again, they're having to go set their own schedule in the SSAA landing. Maybe that's not it, because that you're doing the same thing there. So that maybe not it. Maybe that's not it. It may be because, hey, we don't have regions. We're seeding 1 through 16 in the playoff bracket. True seeding, we have to travel a lot. We lose money at the gate on playoff games. Maybe that's what's all about. At this particular point, there's a lot here, and a lot's going to happen here over come next Thursday. And here's the thing. Florida has changed. Things have changed here in the Sunshine State. Florida's no longer just more. It's basically one primary high school athletic association handling high school athletics anymore in this state. We're like our neighbors in Georgia and Alabama, where there's at least 2 associations handling the regulation of high school sports in this state. Obviously, you got the Florida High School Athletic Association, been around over 100 plus years, obviously, 105 years, I think, this as of, this school year. And now here you are, you've got the Sunshine State Athletic Association, which has been around for, they started out as the Sunshine State Athletic Conference, which it's been around for about almost 2 decades now. I feel like I think 2008 might have been their first. Yeah, they're coming up almost 2 decades now since they formed. And of course, they became the Sunshine State Athletic Association just a few years ago, and it was their process. They were becoming their own association, and you've seen that more so even further, that they have established themselves as an association versus being just a conference and a league that operated within the FHSAA calendar. Where you see, okay, the SSAA has gone to, okay, well, we everybody used week 0 as preseason. They did their regular season weeks 1 through 8, and then they started doing their postseason from week 9 on and into the playoffs a little bit, and that was it. Now the Sunshine State Athletic Association, hey, week 0 counts as a regular season week, so we go week 0 through week 10. You schedule your 10 games in that 11-week span. Playoffs start week 11. And they go into almost now to basically weekend before Thanksgiving now, where the SSA playoffs go. And at this particular point, that's how it is now. And we have to understand that, hey, we're a state with 2 associations now, not just one anymore. And that's just the way. I think the biggest thing in all of this is that I hope in the process of all of this that everybody can meet at the table and be like, hey, what can we do to work together? Because and figure out what are the solutions to making things better. Obviously, you've got dissatisfaction, not just among the rural schools, but you got dissatisfaction from other schools, smaller public schools. I'm going to name, like, hey, you got Lake Placid, you've got Avon Park, you've got Hardy, you've got, DeSoto County, you've got Lemon Bay, just to name a few, Clewiston, Okeechobee, programs that aren't traditional powerhouses, or they've been, maybe they were strong programs at one time, but not in this current time frame. And the fact that they have chosen to go to the Sunshine State Athletic Association, you kind of you got to deep. I feel like for me, you have to dig deeper as to why. What are the reasons why? And was there anything the FHA could do about it? That's what I wonder about. And those are questions that need to be asked. Those are questions that are going to have to be gone through. There's going to have to be a lot of discussion, and some of it may be very uncomfortable for people about what's going on. I know some of it, people are going to boil down to it's the open enrollment error. Yes, we got that issue too. Does the state legislature probably going to have to address some of that in order to combat some of the issues going on? Oh, well, absolutely. Yes, there's some stuff, obviously, there's a House bill and a Senate bill moving through dealing with coaches' pay that is unanimously passed, this week. That they're moving through the committees. It looks like it's really gaining ground. Obviously, there's going to be some changes for the FHA about for FHA policies as well, and bylaws as well in that bill, in these bills. I know one part was to talk about, the transferring during the season, that basically these bills would tamper that down. I haven't recently looked at obviously the language. Because my understanding is that these are companion bills. These are basically the bills that they're saying now. So, and they're going through these committees now, in subcommittees at breakneck speed, getting the approvals, which is great. And I am all for coaches pay and the thing, but that's for a whole nother show, for a whole different topic. But at this particular point, the conversations that are going to need to be had. Some of it's going to be uncomfortable as to why some of these programs have gone the way they have. Those discussions are going to need to be had, and that's going to need to be had between these schools and the Florida High School Athletic Association. Those conversations are going to have to be had, and some of it's going to be uncomfortable. We may not like and some of us in the media may have to ask these questions too. It's not going to be comfortable to ask some of these questions, because at the end of the day, we need to know what's changed, what's happened. We know some of the factors that has happened. Obviously, I mentioned that again. We're in the open enrollment era. School choice. We know that's part of the issue, but there's other things along the way that, if you peel back the layers, like peeling back the layers of an onion, you can kind of start to see more. And that's where I feel like that's going to have to be the direction that the FHA is going to have to figure out, because, yeah, okay, deal with the situation with rural, combine it with Class 1A, try to move forward as best as possible for the next 2 years, 26 and 27. But when the next reclassification comes after the 2027 season for football, what we have now may not even look the same anymore, because of what's happened here now. But I feel like for the next reclassification, those conversations are going to have to start in discussion of what things are going to look like for 2028, 2029, and 2029, 2030. They're going to have to, those discussions are going to have to start in November of this year, November of 2026. You're going to have to start it a year out to start having those conversations, to start putting things together, start talking about what's been working, what's not working. Let's look at let's throw everything on the table and start looking at everything. The more discussion that is had, the more ideas brought to the table, the more people brought to the table, more stakeholders brought to the table on this, the more meetings, I should say, that are had. I feel like maybe that will actually lead to this issue that but the FHA is about to have to tackle here with the board of directors next Thursday won't have to happen again. And that's, again, my opinion, my advice, my suggestion. No one has to listen to it. No one has to take it. I'm just a member of the media, whatever, so forth. At this particular point, we're gonna see what's gonna happen here. obviously, there's going to probably be a couple schools that are left the world that have not deflected to the SSAA that are going to be like, well, this is not good. This is not what we signed up for. There's a lot here. And we're here at FortHSFootball.com. We'll keep an eye on it, see what's going to happen. Hopefully, we'll be able to start talking about the districts. Be able to start talking more about this kind of stuff coming up here over the next few weeks here once things kind of settle down and the dust settles a little bit, basically. But with that said, Thursday, January 29th, we'll go live at 10:45. We'll kind of set the table. We'll bring the live stream in for y'all as well from the FHSAA. We'll have some discussion during that, and then we'll have discussion afterwards, and we'll have the live chat, all that and everything as we go through that. In terms of just trying to really narrow this down, I mean, it's just, again, this is where we're at. You can take away so many different conclusions. Real quick, there was just one thing, and it just popped in my head that I needed. I think what is the ripple effect on this? Well, obviously the Villages has hosted the Rural State Championship game the last 2 years, FIT games. Does the FIT game still exist for the rest of the classifications after this? Big question there. But what is, now the Villages, there's going to be no more Rural State Championship game, no more Rural FIT. If the Rural class is gone. So what's going to happen with the Villages? Does the Villages host anything this year? Is it going to be a 1 year off? Because what happens after this year? Does the Villages bid for all the FHA state championships after this year? The contract at FIU is up. It was a 3-year deal. I think the deal was the same was for the Villages, a 3-year deal. Big questions there. We don't know what the ripple effects are going to be on that. And again, maybe we'll have more clarity. Maybe we'll get some answers to some things we didn't think about during that meeting again next Thursday, January 29th, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Again, we'll live stream that here starting around 10:45. We'll do discussion, have chat, and we'll answer any questions that we can answer as we go through this. But some big things here, and again, we're getting ready to address. Obviously, again, Rural 1A, the stuff with the independent participation outside of the regular season. A lot to be addressed here, and just 2 agenda items in a board meeting that is taking place before the next actual board meeting come February 22nd and 23rd. So, with that said, we appreciate everybody joining us here on the Fort HS Football Show here on FortHSFootball.com and on our Fort HS Football YouTube. If you're not subscribed and you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button at Fort HS Football and hit that notification bell as well. And also, you can listen to this as well on your favorite podcast platform, including Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. We appreciate everybody joining us here on the Fort HS Football Show. Until next time, take care and enjoy your day. Have a good one, everybody.